The arena was alive with the sound of metal against metal, echoing through the towering walls. In the center, a human gladiator stood facing an alien opponent. His armor was battered, his body bloodied, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. He had fought in countless battles, but none like this one. The alien before him was unlike any foe he had ever encountered. She was a creature of beauty and terror, her sleek black and red skin gleaming under the bright lights. She was known as Vele, a warrior from a distant world, feared by all who encountered her. Her claws glistened, ready to strike, but her gaze was something different, conflicted, full of something he could not understand. The crowd roared, demanding blood. The gladiator's grip tightened on his weapon, but he hesitated. The usual thirst for victory and survival burned in his chest. But something about this fight was different. He had faced many foes, but this alien woman, this warrior stirred something inside him. For the first time, he was uncertain. He had been taught to kill, to survive, to be the best. But as he looked at her, kneeling and waiting for him to strike, a strange feeling overcame him. Could he really kill her? Was it necessary? Vala's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. The arena around them faded into the background, leaving only the two of them standing in the center of the fight. She was strong, fierce, and yet there was a sadness in her eyes that made the gladiator pause. She was a warrior, just like him. But was there more to this battle than survival? The crowd's chants grew louder, urging him to finish the fight. But the gladiator could not do it. His heart raced as his mind screamed at him to act, to end the fight as he had done countless times before. But this time was different. He lowered his weapon and took a step back. His decision was not made out of fear, but out of a deep sense of respect for the alien woman before him. In that moment, he made a choice. He would not kill her. The arena fell silent. The crowd was stunned, confused, and angry. They had expected blood, not mercy. The gladiator stood his ground, his chest rising and falling with each breath. Vala, still kneeling, slowly rose to her feet, her expression unreadable. The tension between them was thick, and the silence was deafening. The gladiator could feel the weight of the decision he had just made, but he stood firm. He had chosen to show mercy. Vala's eyes softened. She had been prepared to fight to the death, expecting no mercy from the human gladiator. But now, as she stood facing him, she could feel the respect in his eyes, the silent understanding that passed between them. It was a strange and powerful feeling, one she had not anticipated. For the first time, she felt gratitude, the crowd's anger was palpable, but the gladiator could not back down now. He had made his choice. Vala's expression shifted, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something in her gaze, something that spoke of honor, of mutual respect. She did not speak, but her actions were clear. She bowed her head in acknowledgement of the mercy he had shown her. As the gladiator turned to leave the arena, he couldn't shake the feeling that this fight, this decision, had changed something within him. He had shown mercy where there had been none before, and he could only wonder what consequences awaited him. Vala too remained still, her heart pounding in her chest. The night ahead would be different from any she had ever known. The gladiator's decision lingered in the air as he left the arena. The heavy silence was only broken by the distant roar of the crowd, still waiting for a conclusion to the fight. As he walked down the narrow corridors, his thoughts raced. What had he done? His body ached from the battle, but his mind was consumed with the choice he had made. Had he done the right thing? Vala, on the other hand, remained in the arena. The echo of her own breath filled the space as she stared at the spot where the gladiator had stood. She had expected to die today, her last breath a defiance of the human race, but instead, she had been shown mercy. This feeling gratitude was foreign to her. A warrior trained to fight and never expect kindness. It was unsettling, and yet, something inside her told her it was right. Back in his quarters, the gladiator tried to shake off the unease that weighed on him. He'd been part of the arenas. Bloodshed for years, a champion known for his ruthless victories. But tonight was different. He had chosen a path not of violence, but of mercy, and that decision gnawed at him. Why had he spared her? He had been trained for battle, not for mercy, and yet, it had felt so ... natural. The door to his quarters creaked open, and he turned, startled. Standing in the doorway was Vala. Her stance was calm, composed, yet there was a tension in her presence that he could not ignore. She did not speak at first, but her eyes held him, piercing him with a quiet intensity. He had been expecting her. Yet now that she was here, he wasn't sure what to say. "I owe you my life," Vala said, her voice low and clear. There was no anger in her words, no sarcasm, just an honesty that shocked him. He had heard many beings speak of gratitude, but none with such sincerity. Her words were heavy with meaning, and the gladiator felt something stir in him that he could not explain. "I didn't kill you because I didn't want to," he replied. The words felt simple, but the truth behind them was more complex than he could express. He had not killed her, not out of fear or weakness, but because he felt something deeper, something that was hard to name. Vala stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Then what is it?" she asked. "Why did you spare me?" The gladiator paused, searching for the right words. He could not explain the conflict within him, the battle between the warrior he had been trained to be and the human he was becoming. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just couldn't do it. I couldn't kill you." Vala studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I understand," she said. "You are not like the others." Her words were not a compliment, but a statement of fact. There was something different about him, something that set him apart from the other gladiators who fought for glory and bloodshed. The gladiator's heart pounded as he took in her words. He had never thought of himself as anything special. He was just a man, a fighter, one who did what he was told. But now, standing before her, he realized that maybe he'd been wrong all along. Maybe there was more to him than the violence and the fights. Vala moved closer, her gaze softening. "You've shown me mercy," she said. "In my world, mercy is not given freely, but you, human, you gave it without hesitation. I must show my gratitude." The gladiator took a step back, his body tense. He wasn't sure where this conversation was heading, but he could sense that it was not a mere exchange of words. Vala's gratitude was real, but so was the strange pull between them. He had never felt this way after a fight. Never had someone's respect or gratitude so deeply affect him. "Don't," the gladiator said, though his voice was softer than he expected. "You don't have to do anything. I did it because it felt right. That's all." Vala regarded him with quiet understanding. "But I must," she replied. "I will stay here tonight to show you my thanks. No more fighting, no more bloodshed. I will be here with you." The gladiator was unsure how to respond. He had never expected a moment like this. A warrior he had spared was now offering him something he had never dreamed of. Vala's presence in his quarters was both a comfort and a challenge. The night stretched on, heavy with silence and unspoken words. The gladiator could not deny the connection that had formed between them, and he could not shake the feeling that this moment, this night, would change everything. They sat together, not as enemies or gladiators, but as two beings who had shared something deeper than the violence of the arena. And for the first time, the gladiator felt at peace, knowing that he had made the right choice. The night stretched on, and the gladiator could not sleep. His mind raced with thoughts of the alien woman who had shown him gratitude in a way he had never expected. He had faced enemies before, but none had left such a lasting impact on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that Vala's presence in his quarters was more than just an act of thanks. There was something deeper, something unspoken that tied them together. Vala sat quietly across the room, her posture relaxed but still vigilant. Her eyes occasionally met his, and he saw the same unspoken understanding in them. She was a warrior, one who had been trained to fight, to survive, and yet here she was, in his space, with no weapons drawn and no plans for violence. It was a strange and unfamiliar sight. He couldn't help but wonder what had brought her here. To this point, she broke the silence first, her voice soft yet firm. "I should not be here," she said. "In my world, showing gratitude is seen as a weakness. A warrior does not show such things. But I am not from your world, and I must admit, I am confused." The gladiator met her gaze, unsure of how to respond. He had never considered what it meant to show gratitude, especially not in a world built on violence and survival. He had always been trained to fight, to kill, to survive. But now, with Vala sitting before him, he realized there was so much more to life than just fighting. "Why did you choose mercy?" she asked. "What was it about me that made you hesitate?" He looked down, searching for the right words. "I don't know," he said. "I've fought in arenas all my life, but for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to kill you. You were different from the others. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was your eyes, or the way you stood there, waiting for me to make a move. But I couldn't do it." Vala's eyes softened, and she nodded as if understanding. "You see something in me that others do not," she said. "Perhaps that is why we are both still. Here, you have shown me kindness, and I must return it." The gladiator wasn't sure what to make of her words, but he couldn't deny the connection he felt. It was a strange feeling, one he hadn't experienced before. This wasn't a fight for survival, nor was it about proving who was the strongest. It was something different. Something that made him feel alive in a way he had never felt in the arena. He stood up and walked toward the window, staring out at the alien city beyond. "I never thought I'd be standing here, talking to you like this. I've always believed in the strength of the fight, the power of survival. But now, I'm starting to think there's more to this life than that." Vala stood and approached him, her steps silent. "Perhaps we can teach each other something," she said. "In my world, strength is defined by power. In yours, it seems to be something else." He turned to face her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe we can learn from each other. Maybe there's a different way to be strong." They stood together in silence for a long while, each lost in their thoughts. The gladiator could feel something shifting inside him. His life had always been defined by battles and bloodshed. But now he was beginning to question what he had always believed. Was mercy truly a weakness? Could strength be found in showing kindness instead of taking lives? Viola broke the silence once again, her voice quieter now. "I do not know what will happen between us," she said, "but I feel that we are both at a crossroads. You have shown me mercy, and I must decide what that means for me." The gladiator felt a surge of empathy for her. She was a warrior, trained to kill, to fight for survival. But here she was, grappling with the same questions he had been wrestling with. He understood now that mercy wasn't just something he had given her. It was something they both needed to understand. "I understand," he said, "and I think we're both learning something new, something we didn't expect." Vala nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "Then let us learn together," she said, as the night deepened. The two of them sat in quiet reflection. For the first time, the gladiator felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. He had made a choice, and it had changed everything. He didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in his life, he felt that it was the right one. In the silence of the night, they both began to understand something deeper. Strength didn't just come from victory in the arena. It came from choices that could change the course of lives. And perhaps together, they could find a new path forward. The morning light filtered through the thick, alien atmosphere, casting long shadows across the room. The gladiator woke to find Vala still seated across from him. She hadn't moved since they had fallen into a silent conversation the night before. The stillness between them was comfortable, and yet there was an unspoken tension. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. Vala rose slowly. As the gladiator sat up, she looked out the window, her eyes scanning the alien city below. The sight was alien to him, but somehow, it didn't feel so foreign anymore. He had been a soldier, a fighter, but this new feeling was unlike any victory he had ever experienced. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to live outside of the arena?" he asked. Vala glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. "I have never known anything else," she said. "For me, the arena is life. It is all I have ever known. But now, I see that there is more to this world than just the fight." The gladiator stood and walked over to her. "And what if we could find something else? Something more than the arena?" he asked. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. It was a question he hadn't even realized he was asking until now. Vala turned to face him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You would leave the arena?" she asked, disbelief clear in her voice. "You, the greatest gladiator, would walk away from it all?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Maybe I would. The arena has defined me for so long. But I don't think it's all that I am. I've been stuck in this cycle of violence, fighting for others' entertainment. What if there's more to life than that?" Vala looked away, her gaze drifting to the distant horizon. "Perhaps you are right," she said. "But it is not so simple. I cannot just leave the arena. Not after everything I have done." The gladiator stepped closer to her. "Maybe it's not about leaving it all behind. Maybe it's about finding something more than the violence. We could help each other." Vala turned to him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of weakness. "Help each other," she repeated. "How?" He smiled softly. "We could find a way to break free from this place, from the constant fighting. We could create a life for ourselves, away from the bloodshed." Her expression softened, and for a moment he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. It was a strange feeling, one that seemed to bloom in the silence between them. But Vala was still a warrior, and she knew better than to let herself become soft. She couldn't afford to. "You speak of freedom," she said, her voice steady. "But what does it mean to be free? Can we really leave this behind? Or are we just destined to return to the violence?" The gladiator paused. He didn't have an answer to her question, but he wasn't ready to give up. "We don't have to return to the violence. We have a choice, Vala." She was quiet for a long moment. "Perhaps," she said at last, "but I need time to think. I have been a warrior for so long. I don't know what it means to live differently." He nodded, understanding. "I know, but I believe we can find a way. Together, we can choose something better." Vala looked at him again, her gaze softening. "Maybe we can. I do not know what the future holds, but for the first time I feel different." The gladiator smiled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about the next fight, the next victory. He was thinking about something new, something unexpected. And as he looked at Vala, he saw that she too was beginning to consider a life beyond the arena. They sat together in silence, each lost in their thoughts. The gladiator had never imagined that a moment like this could exist. He had spent his entire life fighting, winning, surviving. But now, with Vala by his side, he realized that there was more to life than just the fight. The silence stretched on. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a peaceful kind of stillness, a calm before a storm that neither of them knew was coming. Vala, once a fierce warrior, had begun to see a future where strength wasn't measured by the number of battles won, but by the choices one made. The gladiator, too, had begun to understand that mercy wasn't weakness, it was a new kind of strength. In the days that followed, the two of them talked more and more. They shared their stories, their hopes, their fears, and with each passing conversation, they grew closer, finding strength in each other. The arena was still there, looming in the distance, but it no longer had the same hold over them. They had found something else, something stronger. Vala was no longer just the alien warrior from the arena. And the gladiator was no longer just the human fighter. Together, they were learning what it meant to be free, and they were ready to face whatever came next together. The sun had risen higher, and the gladiator and Viola sat together in silence. The room they shared felt different now, more like a sanctuary than a place of conflict. For the first time, the gladiator didn't feel the weight of violence pressing down on him. His decision to spare her life had changed everything. Vala broke the silence, her voice soft. "Do you ever regret your decision? Choosing mercy over victory?" Her eyes were focused on the floor, but he could sense the tension in her words. She had spent her life fighting, knowing only the arena's brutality. The gladiator looked at her, shaking his head. "No, I don't regret it. It feels like the right thing to do. I fought for so long, and now I realize there's more to life than the fight." Vala looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "But mercy, is that truly the way to live? To always hold back, to spare those who seek to destroy us?" The gladiator stood up and walked toward the window. He stared out at the city beyond, deep in thought. "I don't have all the answers, Vala. I just know that I want something different. Something more than just winning battles and being celebrated for the blood I've shed." Vala stood and joined him by the window, gazing at the city as well. "And you think that something more can be found here, outside the arena?" The gladiator turned to her, meeting her gaze. "I have to believe it. I have to believe that there's more to us than what we've been trained to be." For a moment, there was silence between them. Vala's expression softened, and for the first time, the gladiator saw a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. She had been a warrior for so long, living by the sword. But now she was considering something entirely different. "I have lived my whole life for the arena," Vala said quietly. "It has shaped me into who I am. But now, I feel like I am standing at the edge of something unknown. Something I don't understand." The gladiator stepped closer to her, his voice firm. "You don't have to understand it all at once. We can figure this out together, you and I. We don't have to keep living the way we have been. We can choose our own future." Vala's eyes searched his, and he saw something shift inside her. The warrior in her was still there, but now there was something else, something softer, something more uncertain. "But what if we fail?" she asked. "What if we're not strong enough to leave the violence behind?" The gladiator reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll be strong enough together. We'll find a way, no matter what." The words hung in the air, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. It was a moment of quiet understanding, a promise without words. The gladiator knew that there was no turning back now. The choice had been made, and now they would face whatever came next together. Vala took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. You've shown me something I never thought possible. Mercy, kindness, hope. You've shown me that there's a way to live without fighting, and for that, I thank you." The gladiator smiled, feeling a sense of warmth spread through him. "We're learning together. This is something we both need. We'll figure it out." With each passing day, the gladiator and Viola spent more time together. They talked, they shared stories, and they began to shape a new kind of life for themselves. The arena, once their world, now felt like a distant memory. They were no longer just warriors, they were two people, trying to find their way in a world that had always expected them to fight. Vala began to teach the gladiator about her people's ways, their traditions, their beliefs. In return, he taught her about human resilience, the strength that came from facing life's challenges head-on. They were learning from each other, growing stronger not in battle, but in trust and understanding. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the pull of their past lives threatened to drag them back into the violence they had left behind. But each time, they reminded each other of the promise they had made to choose something better, something beyond the bloodshed. One day, as they sat together in the quiet of their new home, Vala turned to the gladiator. Do you think we can truly leave it all behind? She asked. He smiled, his gaze steady. I think we already have. We've made the choice. Now, we just have to live it. And as they sat together, watching the sun set over the alien city, the gladiator knew one thing for certain. He had made the right choice. He had chosen mercy. And in doing so, he had found a future he never imagined. A future with Vala no longer as enemies, but as partners in something greater than they had ever known. Asterisk, the days passed, and the gladiator and Vala found themselves growing closer. The life they had once known in the arena now seemed like a distant dream. They were no longer bound by the rules of combat and survival. Instead, they were beginning to carve out a new path for themselves, a path filled with hope, understanding, and a promise to never return to the bloodshed they had left behind. Vala had begun to train the gladiator in new ways, not with weapons, but with skills that focused on building strength from within. She taught him the art of patience, the power of stillness, and the importance of listening to the world around him. The gladiator, in turn, shared the knowledge he had gained from his years of survival. He taught Vala how to think on her feet, how to fight for a cause, not just for survival. They were learning from each other, growing stronger together, but not in the way they had ever expected. One morning, as they sat together overlooking the alien city, Vala spoke, her voice softer than usual. I've been thinking a lot about the past, she said, about the battles I've fought, the people I've killed, the lives I've taken. I've always believed that it was my purpose, my duty, but now I'm not so sure. The gladiator looked at her, his expression thoughtful. It's not easy to let go of the past. Vala, I know that better than anyone, but what we've done here, together, is more than just letting go. It's about finding a new way, a way that's ours. Vala nodded, but the sadness in her eyes remained. I've spent my entire life in the arena, fighting to please others. It's all I knew, but now I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something I can't even begin to understand. The gladiator reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone. We're in this together. We'll figure it out. The words seemed to comfort her, and for the first time in a long time, Vala allowed herself to relax. She had always prided herself on her strength, on her ability to fight and survive. But now, with the gladiator by her side, she was beginning to see a different kind of strength, a strength that came from vulnerability, from the willingness to face her own doubts and fears. As the days turned into weeks, they grew more confident in their new life. They spent their time working on a small piece of land they had claimed for themselves. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Together they planted crops, built shelter, and created a home where there had once been only battle and violence. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the gladiator spoke. I never thought I'd be sitting here with you like this. I always thought my life would be defined by the fights I fought, the victories I won, but now it's different. Vala looked at him, her gaze steady. It's different because we made it different. We made the choice to leave the arena behind. The gladiator smiled, a sense of peace settling over him. Yeah, we did, and I don't regret it. For a long time they sat in silence, the warmth of the fire flickering between them. There was no need for words. They had said everything they needed to. The gladiator had made a choice that had changed his life, and Vala had done the same. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like it was theirs to shape. They didn't need to look over their shoulders or worry about the battles that lay ahead. What mattered now was the life they had chosen for themselves. A life of peace, a life without the violence of the arena. Vala leaned back against the rocks, her eyes closing as she took a deep breath. I never thought this would be possible, she said softly. A life without fighting, without the constant need to prove myself. But here we are. The gladiator looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. We've earned this, he said, and we'll keep earning it. We'll build a life that's not defined by blood, but by the choices we make. For the first time Vala smiled, a small but genuine smile. I think I can live with that. The days passed, and their life together continued to grow. It wasn't easy, and there were still challenges to face. But they faced them together. They had both been warriors in their past lives. But now they were learning to be something else. Partners, not in battle, but in life. As they looked toward the horizon, the Gladiator and Vala knew one thing for certain. The future was theirs to shape, and no arena, no battle, could ever take that away from them. Together, they had found a new kind of strength, one that came from understanding, from compassion, and from the freedom to choose a life without violence. And that was all they needed. The days had become weeks, and the Gladiator and Vala had settled into their new life. The small piece of land they had claimed as their own had transformed into a home. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. The Gladiator had never known such peace in his life. His days were no longer filled with bloodshed and violence, but with the simple tasks of building a future. Vala, too, had found peace in this new life. The arena, once her entire world, felt like a distant memory. She had always been a warrior, fighting for survival, for glory, for others' approval. But now, she was learning to live for herself for the first time in her life. The Gladiator had shown her a different way. A way that was unfamiliar but increasingly comforting. They spent their days working together. The Gladiator built fences, while Vala tended to their small garden. They shared stories of their pasts, of the battles they had fought and the enemies they had faced. But even as they talked about the violence that had once defined them, it felt distant now. It was a part of their past, not their future. One day, as they worked in the garden, Vala stopped and looked up at the sky. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked. "About what comes next for us?" The Gladiator paused, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "I think about it a lot," he said, "but I don't worry about it anymore. In the past, I would have been obsessed with what was coming next. I would have prepared for the next fight, the next battle. But now I just focus on today." Vala nodded slowly, a thoughtful look crossing her face. "It's strange, isn't it? Not to be constantly thinking about the next fight. For so long it was all I knew. But now, I feel like there's so much more to life." The Gladiator smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "There is. You've made it possible for both of us. You've shown me that life isn't just about surviving. It's about living." Vala turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "And you've shown me what it means to choose a different path. A path that isn't defined by violence or death. We've both made our choices, and I think we've made the right ones." The Gladiator nodded. "I think so too. We've built something here, something real, and we didn't need the arena to do it." They continued working together. The task simple but satisfying. As they finished for the day, the Gladiator looked at the home they had built together. It was small, but it was theirs. A life that had once seemed impossible now felt entirely possible. They had created something beautiful from nothing, and in that moment, he realized that he had found his true strength, not in the fights he had won, but in the life he was now building with Vala. That evening, as the sun began to set, they sat on the porch of their small home. The Gladiator leaned back in his chair, his eyes on the horizon. "You know, I never thought I'd be here, living like this. It's hard to believe that we've come so far." Vala sat beside him, her eyes also on the setting sun. "I never thought I'd be here either. But here we are, together. It's not what I expected, but it's more than I ever could have imagined." The Gladiator reached over and took her hand in his. "I'm glad we're here together. I don't think I could have done this alone." Vala squeezed his hand, her eyes softening. "You don't have to. We're in this together. I believe in us." The silence that followed was comfortable, a shared understanding between them. The Gladiator had spent his entire life fighting, but now he was learning what it meant to live, to choose a different way, to make choices based on kindness and respect, not violence. And Vala, once a fierce warrior, had found something she had never thought possible: peace. They sat in silence for a long while, letting the quiet evening wrap around them. The future, once uncertain and filled with fear, now felt open. It was theirs to shape, and they had already begun to do so. Together, they had found a new path, a path of their own choosing. And as the stars began to fill the sky, the Gladiator and Vala knew that no matter what came next, they were ready. They had made their choice, and that was all they needed. The days turned into months, and the Gladiator and Vala continued to build their life together. They had created a home, a place of peace and quiet that they both cherished. The work was hard, but the satisfaction they found in it was unlike anything they had ever known. The Gladiator, once defined by the violence of the arena, now found purpose in the simple tasks of daily life. Vala, too, had changed. The warrior who had once lived only for battle and survival had found a new sense of peace. It wasn't easy for her, but every day she grew more confident in the life they had created. There were still moments when her past life tugged at her, when she longed for the certainty of battle, but those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. She had learned that there was a different kind of strength, one that came from understanding, from vulnerability, from the choices they had made. One morning, as the sun rose, Vala stood outside, watching the landscape stretch out before her. The Gladiator joined her, standing silently at her side. For a moment, they simply enjoyed the view. The peaceful landscape before them was a sharp contrast to the chaos they had both come from. "You know," Vala said softly, "I never thought I could be happy like this. For so long, I thought happiness was a fleeting thing, something only won through power and strength. But now, I see it's something much deeper." The Gladiator turned to her, his voice steady. "Happiness isn't about what you fight for. It's about what you choose. We chose this, Vala, and it's the best choice I've ever made." Vala smiled, the expression more genuine than it had been in a long time. "I agree. Sometimes I think we've created something so perfect that it can't be real. But every day, it feels more real, more like something that's meant to be." He chuckled softly, his hand brushing hers. "I never thought I'd be the one to find peace. I always thought I was destined for a life of fighting and war. But now, I see that there's more to strength than just fighting. There's strength in love, in trust, in what we've built here." Vala nodded, her eyes glistening. "I think I'm starting to understand that. It's not just the battles we win that define us. It's how we choose to live when the fighting is over. And I'm proud of the life we've chosen." As they stood together, the Gladiator felt a deep sense of contentment. He had never imagined his life would turn out like this. He had once been a warrior, defined by his victories, his strength, his bloodshed. But now, standing beside Vala, he realized that his true strength had nothing to do with fighting. It had everything to do with the choices he had made. "Vala," he said, his voice soft, but certain, "I don't need anything else. This what we've created here is all I need." Vala turned to him, her heart full of emotion. "Me too. We've built something real, something that doesn't need to be proven with blood." For a long time, they simply stood together, the weight of their past lives slowly lifting. The Gladiator had found freedom, not in the arena, but in the life he had built with Vala. And Vala had found a place where her strength didn't need to be defined by her ability to fight. They had both discovered that there was so much more to life than the battles they had once fought. The future no longer felt like something to fear. It felt like a path they could walk together. Side by side, they had both faced their pasts, their doubts, and their fears. And now, with each passing day, they had found a way forward. A way built on trust, love, and the freedom to choose something better. "Do you think we'll ever be able to go back?" Vala asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Gladiator thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No, we've come too far. We've built something here, and I don't think I'll ever want to go back to what we were, not now, not after. Everything we found together. Vala smiled, and for the first time, the gladiator saw complete peace in her eyes. It was a peace that had been hard-earned, but it was real. They had both walked through fire, both fought battles they never thought they would survive. But now, standing in the life they had built together, they were free. In the distance, the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over the land. The gladiator and Vala stood side by side, their fingers intertwined. They had chosen this life, and together, they had made it their own. There was no more fighting, no more bloodshed. They had chosen a new kind of strength, one that would carry them through whatever came next. And in that moment, they both knew that they were ready.